Hello and welcome back to UView. I'm Jasper Zellmer. Last year, we had the privilege of meeting the new APS Superintendent Dr. Homan to talk about the transition process and her goals for her time here in Arlington. Today, we are here once again to discuss how this past year has gone and the current work the administration is doing in our district. Dr. Homan, thank you so much for being here today.
It's great to see you, Jasper.
So in last year's interview, you mentioned the goals you had for elementary literacy. Can you tell us how that's been going?
Sure. So one of the things that we've been looking at to decide what we needed to work on first is some of the data around the district in terms of student achievement, how students are doing, and some of the things that we're hearing from family members and from students about their experience too with the curriculum. I think that's actually arguably more important than some of those testing outcomes. So one of the things we noticed was that while we've been making some pretty great gains in math, as a matter of fact, last year we had some really strong student growth in mathematics, we've had fairly stable results in ELA and literacy, and that's even more true for some of our students from varied backgrounds, diverse backgrounds. And when you dig into that a little more, there's been a lot of conversation around the country about literacy programs and programs that do a really nice job supporting, for example, students who are still learning English. Students who are still building schema, by which I mean like knowledge bases around particular topics, and that there are some curricula that are organized really well for that and others that aren't. So we're taking a look right now at replacing the literacy curriculum. It'll be a sort of a slow rollout, and right now we're sort of in the assessment phase. So last spring, a large group of administrators, coaches, and teachers took a look at a variety of programs and narrowed it down to 3, and now we're sort of in the ask everybody phase where we're going to be asking teachers, all of our teachers K to 5, family members, come and take a look at the 3 that we are looking at and rate them on a rubric that's been used and vetted and proven in the past by other communities, and let us know which one you think is one that we should try out, and then we'll be doing implementation in a couple of grade levels in the fall. That's the goal.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And then last year, I know that the heterogeneous grouping initiative was a huge topic of conversation among the student body. So how's that been going?
So I'm pleased to say that some of the work that our teachers are doing is very exciting work in 9th grade ELA. We ended up with a pilot that is 2 years long, which gives us an opportunity to really study it and understand what it is we're doing in those heterogeneous classes. So for the audience, those heterogeneous classes, for people who might not know, I imagine all your classmates do, it's taking honors level and A level and putting them together so that you're not sort of structurally segregating those two groups of students, and giving students some level of option as to how much challenge they want to engage in at the assignment level, honestly. I have a lot of students I've heard about already. First of all, we have more enrollment in honors level work this fall than we've ever had in 9th grade English. We have a lot of students who shifted towards the honors because they realized they were ready for the challenge, which is great news. Yeah. And we want students to challenge themselves. We also want them to understand that that's not all there is to school, and that it's good to be well-rounded. But when students are prepared for that extra challenge, that's when they're honestly usually most engaged. That's what our experience tells us. So if we know that that's going to promote engagement, then we want to give every student the opportunity to at least have the exposure to the more challenging content, whether they choose it or not. We know that historically, when we don't provide that opportunity, a lot of students will build an academic identity that says, I am not, that challenge isn't for me, when in fact, in a lot of cases, sometimes it is. So so the teachers, some of the work they're doing, they read the book Cultivating Genius by Gholdy Muhammad over the summer. They've been really thinking about what constitutes higher level work, cognitive load on for students. How do we make the work more complex, not just more quantitatively more, right? How do we not just give students more to do, but actually give them more complex tasks? So one of the things that I was just saying a moment ago I'd love to hear is more student feedback on it. We've been hearing from teachers about how they're thinking about it. They have common planning time now, which they're really appreciating. So one of the things we need to think about as we think about whether we do this in more places is how do we give teachers more opportunities for that collaborative time? It has to come with it, but that's a resource. Time is always a resource. So we'll be looking for time. We're going to invent time in the Arlington Public Schools.
And I know that you recently shadowed a freshman student at the high school. So did that change any of your thoughts or perspectives on the heterogeneous grouping initiative?
I only spent an hour in one English class with her, so, it didn't tell me a whole lot because I think I'd need to spend a little more time talking with students and seeing. But I will say it was, you could tell, it was evident that the students had some options in that class. That it was clear that they could sort of choose that honors challenge at the assignment level, or if they had already chosen it at the class level, what sort of the expectation was. In the class I watched, students were fairly self-directed on the task for that day, and we're working on an argument essay. So it was, and the shadowing experience itself was a fantastic experience. I followed a student, an AHS student, for the entire day, and including the bus ride, and it was a great, it was a great experience. It really helps you understand that you all shift your brains constantly throughout the day. You shift the people you're around throughout the day, and it's easy for adults to forget what that experience is like. Both physically and mentally.
Yeah, and are you planning on doing that again in the future?
I would love to do that again in the future, Our entire administrative team, my senior leadership team, did that in preparation for some work that we're doing on the leadership side to further our own learning around what deeper learning looks like. And that was our assignment before we went to a convening. And then we brought and compared notes from all across the district, the different students at different levels that we observed, and where we saw really deep engagement and curiosity and opportunities to be creative, and where we didn't, and where we'd like to build and grow. So,
what did you think of the new building?
Oh, I love the new building.
It's fantastic. I love it so much.
Yes, I cannot wait for the next phase to open. At least in part because it's going to offer all of you so many more common spaces and a little more color in that open, one of the things I've heard is it's a little like walking into an Apple store, which I can't disagree with. It's very white, but it's so bright. And I think everybody's getting a little more vitamin D, which lifts the spirits. I'm looking forward to having our teachers all be in some of these state-of-the-art facilities with the technology in the classrooms. I know it can be hard to sort of move from the older building into the newer building for all of you, and it can be hard for the teachers who are still in the older building to still be existing in the older building. So there's a lot of excitement about next fall and about moving into the new wing. Yeah.
And what about, I know you have a strategic plan for the district kind of lined out. So can you talk to me about your priority areas for that?
Sure. So where we're at right now with strategic planning is that we had a group last fall. Some of your colleagues were part of that. And we built a new vision statement for the district. It focuses on growth and joy and empowering individuals as well as communities to make our world better. And we also created 4 strategic priority areas as part of that work. Those 4 areas are ensuring equity and excellence. It's really all about the student experience. That's where I think we're really going to focus on this idea of deeper learning, not trying to cover all of it because that's humanly impossible, right? But trying to go really deep into content that matters to all of you and letting you all steer some of that. That's the goal of deeper learning. Our second priority area is about valuing all staff and making sure that we are giving staff everything they need, that they feel a sense of belonging to, because if they can, understand who they are, their identities as teachers, and talk with all of you about that, then that's going to create a sense of belonging for students. Our third priority area is around improving infrastructure, sustainability, and operations, making sure we have systems in place that are values driven and that are supporting the rest of the system to do what it needs to do, making sure that we're increasing the sustainability of our buildings, that we're helping the town move towards its net zero goals, that our buildings actually support the kind of model of learning that we hope for. So, and then the fourth priority area that we're working on is around building two-way partnerships and with the community and with families. That one is one of the big initiatives in that priority area is to build a welcome center, create a welcome center for families.
I was hearing about that. It's really interesting.
I'm very excited about this because it's something that we might, it's kind of what I would call low-hanging fruit, right? It's something that's fairly easy for us to grasp at. We need a space and we need a little bit of staffing that will allow us to create an environment where families can come, whether they are new to the district or not, to get resources they might need around translation, registration, service providers in town that might not be part of the Arlington Public Schools, but who we have connections to, and it's going to be part of the district office, and it's something that a lot of districts in the surrounding area have, and so we're really looking forward to rolling that out.
Great. And I know that there is an upcoming tax override, and I was hoping you'd talk a little bit about that, because I think those initiatives that you were just talking about are kind of related to that in the sense of, you know, where that money will be going if that school gets that. So can you talk a bit about that?
Sure. So the town of Arlington on a regular basis needs to ask voters to spend a little more on taxes in order to facilitate the schools and the rest of the town having some of the services and maintaining some of the services that we already have. I do think that when exactly that will happen in the next couple of years is yet to be seen, but the strategic plan honestly can't happen without the voters voting for this override, and that's because, you know, all of the things I just talked about are going to require an investment of resources. They might require renovation of some buildings. We have a lot more staff now than we had when we had fewer students. You know, with more students, we need more providers who can meet the needs of those students, and so that also means that the buildings we built weren't built for the number of people we have now. And so that's why we build new buildings like the high school, and it's also why we look to some of our older buildings and try to figure out a way to reconfigure them to make them meet our needs.
And I know that with the the work that you've done with the achievement gaps between students that you mentioned in last year's interview, I know you mentioned that that has caused, you know, more students interested in, you know, like instrumental work and athletics, and I think you mentioned that that has caused some like you know, needing more space for those students because you've made it so more students can be involved in that. Can you talk about that?
Sure. So when I talk about gaps, I talk about two different kinds. So there's achievement gaps. That's the outcomes, right? That they're kind of lagging. You don't know about an achievement gap until after you've tested students and then you have results, or you've surveyed students and then you have results. And at the front of an achievement gap is an opportunity gap. So before you can get to an achievement gap, there is some kind of barrier to access that exists that creates, because the reality is talent is equally distributed across populations. So if you have gaps, it's because there's something in your social system that is creating an access barrier that is resulting in some people not accessing whatever services you provide. So one of the things we did to try to eliminate that last year as part of our budget cycle was we eliminated athletic fees and instrumental fees. This had been a discussion amongst the school committee and administrators before I ever arrived, and we had some more conversation about it and found that we had the ability in last year's budget to try this out and see what would happen if we didn't have these fees this year. And the end result is we had a lot more students try out for athletics, and we have nearly doubled the enrollment in our instrumental program at the early grade, at grade 3.
That's awesome.
Which also means we have trombone ensembles like practicing next to a math class, which is a slight challenge, but it's like the best challenge to have, because we know that when you're connected to the arts and when you're connected to athletics and when you're connected to clubs like this one, and when you have those extracurricular outlets, you're more connected to school. You have more connections with peers, and that impacts academics. So it's a bit of a theory of action, but we know that if we provide more access to some of the enriching programs that we have, we're going to improve the academic outcomes for students too.
So all of those things you just said, you know, that is where the money will go toward for the tax override, right?
Absolutely.
So can you talk about, you know, what would you say to students? How can students, you know, maybe talk to their parents to, you know, how can they make their voices heard in this and you know, be involved in like getting these things for their school experience?
I'm so glad you asked that question. It's such a fantastic question. So I last night went to speak to the League of Women Voters in Arlington.
Oh, wow.
And that was a lot of fun because we talked about what the work is like, some of the issues that matter most to them. And one of them asked me a really important question, which is how do we increase voter turnout in Arlington? And how do we begin that work with kids before they can ever even vote? And I think some of the number one things that you and your peers can do is, first of all, if you are a senior and you are 18 and you are eligible to register to vote and to vote, go register and go vote. And if you are not, help your peers who are.
Yeah.
Get registered to vote. And if that also does not apply to you, talk to your parents about the issues that are on the ballot and educate yourselves about who the people are who are on the ballot. Like we might be electing a new school committee member at some point in the future. When we are doing that, like learn who are the people, because those people on the school committee, they influence your experience in school every day. They make decisions about the budget. It's their budget. It's not ours. So knowing what those issues are and encouraging your parents, or even educating your parents about what's going on, because they're working, they might be busy and may not know some of the things that will impact your experience in the schools that they have a direct influence on if they go and vote, is probably the number one thing, increasing turnout. Yeah,
and with the initiatives that you're talking about. So that's how students can get involved with the voter turnout and the tax override. How can they be involved if they want to be directly involved with the projects you're working on, with the initiatives? Is there a way for them to be involved with that?
Certainly. So I have visited the student council this year. I'm getting involved in student governance, and student council is one great way to get involved, because the administration in particular is really trying to make sure we align our efforts in one direction. So the work the student council is doing, they created a vision statement for the AHS student council this year that came directly from the vision statement for the district, which was absolutely fantastic to see. I think one of the things I've been thinking about is how I build my connections with students. Shadowing is one way to do that. Creating opportunities for students to give us feedback is another way. We're doing empathy interviews right now across some PE and wellness and health classes on the initiatives we have, just to make sure that in crafting them, we're not leaving student voices out of that work. And really, I think teachers are looking for a lot of ways to improve choice opportunities in the curriculum. And sometimes the best way to do that is to listen to the students about what they want to study. And so advocating for the things you want to study in a class, or saying, hey, what if we dug it further into that? I'll bet your teachers would follow your lead in that direction. And that would help us build deeper learning experiences too. And asking your teachers too, sometimes we know we want student feedback. Sometimes we don't always think to ask for it. But if there are moments where you're like, actually, I think my classmates could have some really good feedback on this thing we did, remind your teachers too, and your administrators, that you got to ask for our feedback if you want us to have a voice in this. And they'll follow your lead.
Great. So this past year has been fantastic, and it sounds like you have some amazing things coming up. Was there anything else, any highlights that you wanted to share, or anything you're looking forward to, anything you're proud of?
Oh, there's so much I'm looking forward to. I'm really proud of the work that a large group of stakeholders, including students, have done on some of our strategic planning. I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays out in real life. I think it's easy for us to take a strategic plan, put it on a shelf, and say, yeah, that's a thing we wrote once. And I'm really hoping that that's not the case, that it's alive. And so I'm looking for, and if you all have feedback, please let me know what it is. But opportunities that are structured for us to engage with students and to get students' input on how the system is working for them. We do instructional rounds, for example, and we're continuing to do that. And now we're thinking about, how do we break this so that we're maybe we do them with teachers, and maybe we do them with students, so that we can all see what different kinds of instruction looks like and how to improve it.
Dr. Homan, thank you so much for being here today.
It was great.
I'm so happy to have you back.
I hope to have you again.
And I hope to have you back in the future too. That'd be fantastic.
Happy to come back anytime.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of UView. I'm Jasper Zellmer. We'll see you next time.